Hello and welcome to Southeastern 16's preview of Baylor and Mississippi State in the NCAA Tournament. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Blake Lovell. You may see this one Friday, 11:15 Central on CBS or in person in Raleigh. The predictive computers have Baylor by about 1.5 in this. Don't know what the odds makers have as of this recording, which we're doing early Wednesday morning. Blake, let's open with your thoughts on Baylor and Mississippi State.
Yeah, like you said, I think the line on this one's interesting. Mississippi State is favored by a point here. I mean, this is your kind of typical 8-9 matchup. I mean, I think it's two teams that probably feel like they left a little bit on the table this season. Remember, how long ago was it? Not that long ago. We're talking about Mississippi State having a 2-seed or 3-seed profile, and then they just hit a really rough patch in SEC play where they just could not, surprisingly, Chris, could not find enough defense. And I think that was kind of the thing where we're used to seeing some of those teams with Chris Jans be pretty stingy defensively. But we said the one thing that stands out more than anything else this season, not the fact that they don't shoot it well, because I think that on paper this probably wasn't going to be the greatest shooting team, but it's the fact of how well teams shoot against them. That 314th in the country in three-point field goal defense, 36.1% is what teams are shooting against Mississippi State. Don't look now, but Baylor is not a bad shooting team. They shoot about 35%. That's where they get the most percentage of their points from, is from three. So we also know, Chris, if you're looking for the Max Bar bully ball game of the day, it could be Baylor and Mississippi State, two very high-octane rebounding teams. Baylor's always been a good offensive rebounding team, it seems, under Scott Drew. You're going to see a lot of banging there on the glass in this one in Raleigh.
It's too bad Max couldn't be part of this. I mean, that's
know.
just a crying shame. Hey, we are an SEC channel. Let's start with a look at Baylor, which had, frankly, just a kind of a weird year. Baylor starts the year preseason number 9 and AP number 8 by our friend Chris Dortch at Blue Ribbon, and consequently gets its doors blown off by Gonzaga, 101-63 in the season opener. Then recovered to have a nice year, but not the year Baylor expected, going 19-14. However, boy, I feel like this has been a recurring theme throughout all of our previews and our shows. Look out for that lower-seeded team with some talent and some expectations. And boy, Baylor's got it. Norchad Omier, 6'7" Miami transfer, does everything well, also fouls a lot. VJ Edgecombe, potential top 5 pick in the NBA draft this year. Do-it-all guard, Robert Wright III, freshman who was third in minutes, Gatorade Player of the Year last year in Pennsylvania. You got Jaden Nunn, 6'4" transfer from VCU, 41% on threes in a high-volume situation, 40% on twos. Jeremy Roach, who came from Duke, Final Four experience, 35% three-point shooter. Jalen Celestine, 6'7" grad transfer from Cal, 35% on 108 threes. That right there is a nice nucleus of players who can win Baylor some games, and we're expected to win more games than they did this year, Blake.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like they have a profile of a team where it's like, man, come on, like they could win a couple games here. And it's like, okay, we've seen Scott Drew work his magic before in terms of, hey, taking a team to a national championship and those kind of things. And like when you look at the individual players, I mean, you mentioned like Omier. I mean, how many big games has this guy played in now, right? I mean, like he was part of that team, a couple years ago that made the run and all this other stuff. And so I'm like, all right, he's played in some big games. And again, some of these other guys have as well. And I think that's something where when you look at it from that standpoint, man, there's a lot of talent on this roster. And, again, knowing that some of these guys have played in some pretty high-profile games, I mean, even, you could probably go to Jeremy Roach too, right? I mean, go back to, he was on that Duke team that lost to Tennessee, I think, a couple seasons ago, right? In the second round or whatever. So it's just, these guys have played some big minutes and big games, and I think that will account for something here. They're the more experienced team in this matchup. So I do think that will come into play. And then it's just like, I try to look at this from, okay, one of the things that, again, Baylor can be knocked for is that they don't defend well from three statistically. But Mississippi State's not really a team that's going to challenge you there unless they just go off, unless Josh Hubbard has one of those games. Well, guess what? We've seen that happen. It's possible because look at the last, two of the last three games for Mississippi State. They hit 12 threes against Arkansas. They had 15 against LSU. So could they have one of those nights where they're able to exploit some of those things, where you have, potentially a Josh Hubbard just completely going off? He was 6 of 12 from three in that game against LSU in the SEC tournament. Riley Kugel hits a couple. Claudel Harris gets a couple. Sean Jones hits a couple. Can you have one of those nights for Mississippi State where I think that's something where there's a clear way to take advantage for both of these teams in terms of the defensive elements that the other brings to the table? But I just, again, I don't, it's hard to know too, because I think the offensive glass is really going to define a lot of this. And in all honesty, Mississippi State kind of has somewhat of an advantage there because Baylor does give up, some offensive rebounds. So is it safe to say, Chris, like it's two teams that don't have like overly spectacular profiles, but in the right scenario, like they're teams that can win multiple games in the SEC or the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean they're both confusing. Let's just cut to the chase. I mean, and with Mississippi State, it was, I think they were one of the hardest three teams for us to figure out all year. I mean, they won. I'd have to fact check it, but it felt like they won more on the road in the league than they did at home. They got all these lengthy athletes who can get out on shooters. They got a coach in Chris Jans who just preaches defense, but they left shooters wide open all year. I don't know. I still, man, I watched them so many times. I still don't have a handle on it. Now, I do have a handle on this. Josh Hubbard is a guy that can win a game by himself. He's 5'11". Don't let that fool you. He's got a quick release, gets off a high volume of shots, and hits a lot of them. Keyshawn Murphy can drive the ball and hit that little mid-range jumper with the best of them. Cam Matthews, one of our favorite players. Just a do-it-all guy. Scoring probably not his forte, but just a hustle guy, gets assists and steals. And R.J. Melendez at times, Illinois transfer, could really do some stuff. I mean, I just look at these, and I'll be honest, I'm not even entirely sure who I'm going to pick in this one, because when I look at all these teams, like, okay, which team are we talking about with each of them? Because we saw really good things, and we saw sometimes that they were very underwhelming.
I think in the 8-9 games, this is the toughest one to predict, and I think the spread showcases that, why it is what it is, because I just don't have a good grasp on what you're going to get from either of these two teams, because I think, again, there are some similarities, there are some differences in a couple areas, but I almost am like, just flip a coin here on maybe who wins this game, because and again, that shows in the spread. I don't think there is just – I feel like in some of these matchups we've looked at, there have been clear, identifiable things that you're like, all right, that's where it's game over for Team A or Team B. I don't see that here in either. And I know both fan bases will say things that'll be like, hey, there is this one area where we feel like we are simply better than, the other team. And they may be right, but I don't see it as that obvious with these two. So
yeah.
I think you're sort of just trying to figure out which team are you going to get. And look, I mean, if you're looking at it from Baylor's perspective, lost by 4 at home to Houston, lost by 2 in the Big 12 tournament to Texas Tech, lost by 2 at Cincinnati, 2 at Colorado, 7 at home to Arizona. They lost by 4 in overtime to BYU, 3 at home to TCU. I mean, they played a lot of close games, lost at UConn early in the season by 4. It's just like they've had a lot of close games where it's just a couple other things go their, different direction. Maybe it's somewhat different. But you know what? Like with Mississippi State, right? They lost the game in Arkansas by a point, lost to Texas in overtime, 6 at Oklahoma, 4 at home to Alabama, 5 at home to Kentucky. So it's just, let's just make our picks. I'm just telling you up front, I don't have a confident choice in this game.
I don't either. And it's, I think this is where I'm going to settle. And Chris Jans has done a really good job of getting teams prepared for tournaments. The wins haven't always been there. And I think this is where I'm going to settle. Usually when I'm in doubt, I go with these boxes. One of them is where were you ranked in the preseason, which is an indication of where all the talent is if it goes well. Baylor's ranked, Baylor wins that one. 3-point shooting. Baylor's been the better 3-point shooting team. Not a super team, but it'll shoot a volume of them, and State gives up open looks. And the third thing I think is Scott Drew. The last time Scott Drew lost an NCAA tournament opener would have been 2015-16. Now, they didn't go in 20 because of COVID, and they missed it entirely in 2018. But those things to me are things that I lean on, and those are three things that really click in Baylor's favor. But can I be wrong about this? Sure. Am I confident in my pick? Not at all, because with State, they can look great one night and very ordinary the next, and that could flip. And they did play well away from home, but I will go with Baylor here.
All right, our guy Max, traveling at the moment, he's also going to pick Baylor in this one. Now, I wonder if Max is doing that from the reverse mojo standpoint because he doesn't want to pick against his Bulldogs of Mississippi State, the bully ball university. But I'm going to push back a little bit on what you said about the Scott Drew thing. How about this from VEASAN? Here's an interesting stat. So, Scott Drew, 20-11 in the NCAA tournament as a head coach. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, he's won a national championship, all those things. However, keep this in mind. The last time Baylor was a double-digit seed, they're not now, but they're a 9, was 2008. That was his first tournament appearance with the Bears. This is as close as they've been as a 9 seed, so to that double-digit mark. So 20-11 is a good record, right? But 13 of those wins have come against double-digit seeds, and 7 are against seeds that were 13 or higher. So keep that in mind when you look at the overall number, right? This is a different spot for Baylor. And so I think that's a little bit different here as you see it in this scenario. However, there is also something, too. We talk about strength of schedule, right? I mean, look at the teams Baylor played this season. I mean, it's not like they're just sitting there, as we said, losing to a bunch of chumps. I mean, they've got a top 10 strength of schedule, and I think, the game one of the season, losing the way they did at the Zags, it's sort of people lost their minds, but I still think they're pretty good. I have no idea what happens in this game. This may be one of the, if I had to rank the games, this is probably bottom 5 in conference level in the entire first round. So I say all that to tell you that Baylor has more guys, I think, that can just go off. And, I think they have They have 2 guys that are averaging 15 or more points per game. Roach is averaging 10. Wright's averaging 11. And then it's like there's Hubbard for Mississippi State, who just is averaging 19 and can go off and completely change the dynamic of the game. Surprisingly, I'm going to pick Mississippi State in this one because I think that the advantage on the offensive glass, despite all those things I just said, I think Mississippi State could use the bully ball mentality here of Max Barr and be able to get a few more offensive rebounds, and maybe that's the difference. I think it's a close game, but I'm sort of not confident, but I'm going to lean Mississippi State on this one, but I don't feel great about it. So,
yeah, I think I suspect if Max were here, he would have some of the same confusion we've had in trying to make our picks. Hey, if you have more clarity than we do, and I hope you do, Bracket Bids is a place where you need to go to put your money where your mouth is.
Yep. Enter the free pick'em contest, start an auction draft league. You can do it both over at Bracket Bids. They'll tell you all the details over there of how to get up and going. For league play, use that promo code SE16 for 40% off. SE16, 40% off. Download the Bracket Bids app today or visit them at bracketbids.com.
All right. I'm Chris Lee. He's Blake Lovell. God bless you. Have a great day. Thanks for watching our content here at Southeastern 16. To get more of it, subscribe. That's free. Enable your notifications so you know when we put up stuff, and we do baseball, football, basketball all across the channel. Again, appreciate you watching. We'll see you again soon with more content throughout the NCAA tournament here at Southeastern 16.